though not everyone is here, obviously, we're going to start so that we're able to stay on time, and we'll probably take a break for a photo whenever everyone is present. So today's topic is really an area that I don't particularly work in, but together we can work through and understand some of these concepts. Literary theory, semiotics, and existential phenomenology. To connect the dots between what literary theory has to do with qualitative data analysis, well, we might make several observations. First of all, both qualitative research and literary theory are about analyzing text. The text may be what people say, it may be images, or it may be literature itself, as we'll see in a moment. Film theory also brings in the visual and oral elements, so not just the text, but the sound and the images that we see as well. And both films and literature tell us stories, and we're interested in telling stories about the qualitative data that we find. And in fact, when we're talking to consumers, they're telling us stories. We begin oftentimes with, tell me about your holiday, tell me about your new car, whatever it might be. We're also representing our findings via storytelling. So we ourselves are telling stories of what it means in terms of our interpretation of the data. And advertising and packaging, at least sometimes, also tell stories, sometimes explicitly. These peanuts were grown on such and such a farm, and this family has been doing this for so many years, and so forth. It may be a simple story, it may be a character that represents Colonel Sanders, for example. Was he a real person? Yeah, in this case he was. There was a Colonel Sanders. In other cases, it may be a fictitious character that's made up, it's a persona. So there was no Mickey Mouse, there was no Ronald McDonald before McDonald's and Disney created these characters. We also engage in narrative and discourse analysis oftentimes to tie all of this together, to begin to analyze, well, we'll see the difference between the two of them, but to begin to analyze the stories and the narrative that people are using in order to communicate with us. And films and novels themselves may tell us something about consumption and marketing and life in general. One of the reasons that we read stories, see films, is to learn about experiences in life, perhaps a life different from ours, perhaps one that resonates with us and sends a message of what we might be about as well. So to take that last point as a possible example, what sort of consumer insights might you get from Big Brother, from watching Big Brother and the activities that occur on the show? And you don't have to be right or wrong, there is no right or wrong here. Can you see anything that we might learn about consumption from watching this series?
Yes, the kind of recent trend in the clothing, how people are, like how the trend is moving, so maybe that can be observed through these kind of shows. We get motivated how they are dressed.
Okay, good. And so we can, we can see examples here. Different male clothing, different female clothing, different ages of these people, and that might have different styles for different age groups as well. And so clothing is one thing that's expressive here, and it involves consumption certainly. Any other possible consumption messages, or even just areas of consumption information?
The way they talk.
The way they talk, okay, good. So they're trying to impress people, they're trying to appear suave, debonair, having attractive features, characteristics, and so forth. And that's a form of consumption as well. We're consuming language, if you will. We're using it in particular ways. We're talking in particular fashions. Anything else?
How they are doing daily activities.
Say again?
How they are doing daily activities, regular daily activities.
Okay, how they represent the activities that they participate in and what their lives are about, and presenting essentially their lifestyles and giving us some feeling of what they're like. We could also look at gender. Obviously, the clothing here is different for males and females, and as I mentioned, age might be a factor as well. And then there's the audience. How does the audience try to respond to these ideas, and how do they push a candidate forward or push a candidate downward? What's happening in terms of audience response and how they read these characters as well. If we wanted to get the audience response, how would we get that?
Sorry,
So it is through voting on online platforms for videos.
Okay, so online, we look for social media and what people are talking about. We do an ethnography, basically. And so that's a part of the audience consuming this show as well. And if it were to go off the air, there's probably a segment of the market that would say, don't take it off, and would be loyal to the show and has made it a part of their life for years and wanted to continue. So that sort of audience response can sometimes rise to the top when they're clamoring, and this happens with other shows as well. When they're clamoring to the network, don't take this off, we want this, this is good, as well as, of course, influencing the outcome of which characters are the big boss, gets to be the big boss. So we say truth is stranger than fiction sometimes, but this is a combination of both. Is this a scripted show or an unscripted show? In other words, is it decided beforehand what's going to happen, or is it spontaneous? Are you seeing real life? Both? Is that what you... Okay.
So they do tell us that it's unscripted, but some of the participants do come out and say that no, everything is scripted beforehand. Like they tell you that how to behave, or whom to fight, whom to love.
Okay. Someone was talking about...
I think there is a connect. They look at the consumer perspective, the audience,
Right.
and based on their taste and preferences, they tweak the story. They have scripted, but it's not fully exactly scripted. They, with the time, they change the course of show and depend on the audience. I think whom they like, whom they want to kill, kind of things, or whom they want to remove from the show. Kind of based on that, I think they create. So majority they look for.
Okay, so there are certain types of stories that are being told here, certain types of personas that are a part of the show. We could look at something else. I was talking to someone not in the class the other day about professional wrestling, which I gather is shown on television or online in India. If you're familiar with professional wrestling, is that scripted?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a dramatic performance. It's all scripted. Who's going to be the good guy and the bad guy, and who's going to do what to whom. It's maybe sort of like a ballet. The ballet moves and so forth are scripted ahead of time. And so even though we might regard it as a fiction, it's not real. They all decided beforehand who's going to win and who's going to lose and so forth. We may nevertheless suspend disbelief and get into the action, even though we know it's fake. And that's a little bit like getting into the hype of a new phone that comes along or a new smart device, that we're again sort of suspending disbelief and we'll expect a miracle even though we know it's not really going to happen and it's going to be something better coming down the line later. Okay, we're talking about analyzing narratives and analyzing discourse here. And just to distinguish them, narrative analysis looks at interpreting consumer experiences and motivations by looking closely at the stories, that is, the narratives that people use to tell their stories. And so, what is this story all about? What is this big boss persona all about? What is this person trying to convey? How successful are they? Or with the wrestling example, what is the moral of these stories? And these are moral stories that usually the good guy wins, but sometimes the bad guy wins, and it creates drama and tension, even though it may be scripted ahead of time. So that's fairly close to the text of what's happening. discourse is a bit broader than that. It belongs to speech, but it's a way that text and language help us realize what is happening in culture. And so if we're looking at what's happening in terms of the audience of Big Brother, Big Brother's the American and English name, Big Boss, we're looking at something a bit broader than a particular performance, if you will, particular episode, particular segment of the show. And we're trying to infer something about culture, something about how people feel about this when we're looking at the audience. And that includes also extra linguistic factors, the clothing, the expressions, the mannerisms, and so forth. All of that goes into the interpretation. And sometimes ethnography might be a form of discourse analysis. We're trying to find out what people are saying about the show, what they're saying about a new phone that we were looking at last time. Is that last time? One of the last two times. And so really we could see narrative analysis as being something that occurs within a broader discourse analysis. And so it's trying to look at particular stories, particular ways of expression, and those go into perhaps a broader understanding of discourse in the culture itself. Is that distinction clear? Okay. This is an ad for Coca-Cola, and let me play it for you and then tell me how you think the audience reacted to this. This was shown at the American Super Bowl, which is the biggest event and draws the biggest crowd. And in fact, they have to re-engineer the plumbing of cities because there's a sudden loss of water pressure as everyone goes to the toilet during halftime. And so it's a big event. And it's something that is especially well received in the cities of the teams that are playing each other for the championship. But it has a broad audience as well, and people have parties, and, Super Bowl parties, and get together and watch together. So whoops. So let me just see if I can bring this up. Okay.
For spacious skies, por tus olas de granos ámbar.
Oh, sorry. Let's pull that back again. It was working so well. I think I had to do this. At any rate, let's look at the music, and because that's a little bit more important to keep in the visual here. The visuals are all sorts of beautiful landscapes in America, forests and lakes and canyons and so forth. So just listen to the lyrics and maybe we'll get an idea.
For spacious skies, por tus olas de granos ámbar. Yo piszę na
Certainly. Great dancer.
This is no video.
Sorry.
There's no video.
Yeah, I know. Audio. Just listen. Now they're showing happy scenes of people.
Sea to shining sea.
And now there's just a Coca-Cola with canyon lines in the background. They're showing people of different ethnicities as this is going on, and young and old, and different apparent backgrounds. This was intended to be a message of unity, that we're all in this together, immigrants and old families that have come many generations ago. But that's not how it was received. People said, what is all this crazy language? I want to hear American, which was the language. And so this was a very conservative, reactionary message that blew up for Coca-Cola. They thought this would be a warm and fuzzy message, everyone happy together, all sorts of people getting along. But that's not the way the audience read it, or at least the conservative portion of the audience, which was vociferous part of the audience. They were raising these complaints. Yeah? Oh, we just need to remove that. Okay, thank you. So we need to pay attention to how the audience is responding, rather than just how we think this ad is going to be received. However, semiotics looks for cues that may be interpreted in a common sort of way, rightly or wrongly, and it assumes that red as a color means something particular, and that red is a color of excitement, activity, happiness. Is that assumption true everywhere? Okay.
For me, red is danger.
Okay.
I don't like red.
Okay, so you personally, as opposed to this is a cultural reference, that it means something different in India?
Right.
It means something a little different in China, for example, where red is a color of celebration. In Chinese New Year, we have lots of red on it, for example. Yeah? No? Okay, so we look for cues in semiotic analysis, the age of this person, the way she's looking, her makeup, and the Coca-Cola, which is an old-fashioned bottle that they brought back, designed from the 1930s, really, and a particular script of Coca-Cola. That script may tell us something about this being an old brand that has been around for some time, and they've tried to change it over the years, but have come back to the script as having nostalgic power to bring back the image of Coca-Cola, perhaps from people's childhood. And the circular logo with Coca-Cola in it has been around for a long time. So semioticians are trying to look at universal sorts of cues, perhaps successfully, perhaps unsuccessfully, as we'll see. So here's a text, for example. This is an interview. It's an interview about an automobile. And the interviewer, and the topic is safety. The interviewer says, what's the most important feature you look for in a vehicle? And the participant says, safety. Have you noticed the state of safety features on brand X? Yes, but I'm leaning toward brand B. Yes, is the probe. Brand B has a storage compartment under the front seat for my purse. Oh, yes, it's really the best thing for staying safe. Really? Last year I stopped for a red light and someone broke the front window and stole my purse. It was on the seat next to me. Tell me about it. First, they got away with my purse. How did that make you feel? Which is a common probe in semiotic analysis, or in discourse analysis. I was terrified. Plus I had to fill out a police report, get the window replaced, and deal with the insurance company. So when you think of security, would you say, keep your valuables in a secure place? Anything else? Brand B has a storage space under the seat. They understand where I'm coming from. I can rely on them. Maybe this is a realistic scenario. This is an actual interview that took place. What might we learn based on this interview that we might not have expected going in?
Definition of safety.
That what?
The definition of safety.
Okay, the definition of safety, what it means to this woman, having had a particularly traumatic experience a year ago. What else?
Safety first.
Say again?
Safety first.
Safety first, okay, safety is...
I mean, unless until you probe deeper into your perception or understanding of safety is different, and what she is talking, her safety is different. We usually think vehicle safety when you go for a crash, or driving safety, kind of seat belt or the airbags kind of things. But the consumer is not looking for that exactly. Consumer is looking for something else.
Okay.
Our definition of safety is very different, which you never thought of.
Yeah, so the researcher probably had one idea in mind of what safety was, and this woman is talking about purses and safety of her purse and outside intrusion. So that's not the way probably we would expect a person to talk about safety. Furthermore, this looks like the key thing that is important to this woman in choosing an automobile. It's not the design, it's not the storage capacity, it's not the performance. It's the purse, safety of the purse. I'm guessing that most automobile manufacturers would not design their cars around safety of the purse. And in fact, this may be a relatively small segment to whom that's a primary concern, but enough of a difference that it might influence the choice of people like this of the particular automobile. And it's, you know, you put a little plastic tray under the seat of the car. It can't cost very much to do that. And that would be enough to woo this woman to buy this particular brand. And so this is probably a revelatory insight that, first of all, it's all about safety, and second, what's safe is the valuables that someone could steal. But they want to feel safe in this cocoon of a car, sort of a womb-like structure, if you will, but protected by steel and glass. And not feel vulnerable. Now, she doesn't go to the extreme of having bulletproof windows and other safety, security, military devices in the car, tasers and so forth, which are probably illegal anyhow. But rather, it's just out of sight, out of sight, that no one is going to break into my car and know that they have to go under the seat. In fact, they're certainly not going to be able to do that at a red light. It can't be a snatch and grab. So the text is important and useful for understanding the consumer response to in this case, the automobile, and I presume advertisements for the car as well. Semiotics then is the analysis of signs, and I don't know if I'm going to be any more successful in calling up these clips. But let me try one and see.
I need a break.
You're not able to see that either. Well, this is an ad first, and let me see how this does with just the audio.
When should I post? Sir, OTP.
It's talking about terms.
From Nestle.
That's in fact the wrong. I think you can make.
Hello everybody, it's Tom. Welcome back.
Oh, you're going to copy it. It's yep, that's the one. Great.
Now, I want to introduce three particular terms that are going to become very important for this week and for next week. I'm going to go into them a bit next week with the reading. Now, I want to introduce those terms in a preliminary way just so you understand what I mean by that, because it's going to be difficult for me to talk about the documentary and film as document without bringing up this very important idea of the index. So what do I mean by index? Well, I'm actually invoking this philosopher's three categories of science. Philosopher is an American pragmatist philosopher named C.S. Peirce. He became very important in later film theory for people trying to understand early accounts of what photography was. Why is photography so special? The idea was that the photographic or cinematic image's status as a document is tied to its indexical powers. Basically, we can think of index and the indexicality of photography as like a special and precise way of understanding something that I think most of us intuit, which is the idea that if I take a photograph of an apple and I show you the picture of the apple, you believe that that picture is not just a representation of an apple, it is also a document of that apple that existed in the past. This is indexical. Why? Because an index is the kind of sign that shows evidence for the existence of what it refers to, like a footprint, like a weather vane, or like a bullet hole. Think of those individual things that we encounter as signs. And what is a sign? A sign is just anything that stands in for something else that isn't there. Like the word tree stands in for this idea of tree. And I can tell you the word tree without having trees nearby to point to. Index is a kind of sign that points to or shows the evidence for the existence of a particular material thing that was there in the world, like the foot.
And a sign is just something that represents something else. And so this is three types of signs that we're looking at.
That was there, that I assume to be there if I see its footprint. I can distinguish this from two other really important and common types of signs. The icon is probably the kind of sign we're most familiar with. An icon is a thing that has a physical resemblance to the thing that's being presented. A figurative painting, or a painting in which you recognize particular things, like the Mona Lisa, is not a photograph of all one. It is a representation or an iconic sign of a woman that we're calling Mona Lisa. And a symbol is a kind of sign that doesn't have a resemblance to a thing in the world, that has no resemblance between the signifier and the signified. The connection between them must be culturally learned. What's a good example of a symbolic sign? Words. Remember that tree I mentioned earlier? Think about the word tree, both in its visual form, as T, R, E, and E, or in its heard form, the sound tree, or if you speak Spanish, arbol. Think about all the languages in which a particular sound stands into that thing that has bark and has leaves and that flows in the wind. The sound tree has no resemblance to that thing out there. It doesn't have the same connection to that thing out there that a painting of a tree does. That's why we call it symbolic. It's an artificial, or rather it's an arbitrary relationship to the thing. It's just cultural.
Okay, so cultural conventions. Index, symbol, and icon are the bases of Persian. It looks like it's spelled Pierce, but it's pronounced Persian, Peirce, Charles Peirce. And these are his three categories of types of signs. Any questions on those distinctions? Well, I'll show you this again, but let me just show you some other clips now that look at de Saussure, who is the other prominent semiotician that gave us part of the ways to understand signs. And let's look at this top one. We're just looking at the bottom one. Last night. No, this is when I came here. So, not open the address because the address isn't down. Oh, I see it. You did all of it. Again, there's some free advertising before we get to.
Hello, my name is Tom and welcome back to my channel where I talk a little bit about theatre, a little bit about being a PhD student, and a little bit about those two things taped together. Today, another episode of What the Theory, in which we're looking at semiotics. Now, I've had a few people ask me in the comments to some of my other videos to talk a little bit about some concepts surrounding postmodernism, maybe do some What the Theory videos around those. It's certainly a term which is quite often misunderstood and misused in popular discourse. However, I thought it may be a little bit presumptuous to try and jump straight in with postmodernism and post-structuralism before we have a real understanding of what modernism and structuralism might be. So, today we're going to begin that journey towards maybe looking at postmodernism by having a little look at semiotics. I'm always really keen to respond to suggestions and comments that people leave, so if you have anything you particularly like me to do a theory video about, then please do let me know down below. If you'd like to see those, then please do click on that subscribe button, wherever that is. So here we go with another episode of What the Theory. Semiotics is, in short, the study of signs. And in the humanities, like those things that stand by the sides of roads, we use the term sign to talk about something which stands in for something else. Examples of signs are many and multitude. For example, we might describe words as being signs, because when I write down the word dog and show it to you, it allows me to communicate the idea of a dog to you, without me having to go out, find a dog and show it to you and point to it. A picture of a dog, whether a crude hand-drawn image on a piece of paper or a very realistic photograph, is also a sign, because it's evoking the idea of a dog without them actually being a dog present. We could also describe physical actions as being signs. So, for example, if I was to use my years of experience in the theatre to mime being a dog by barking, maybe sticking out my tongue, we can also describe that as a sign. And it doesn't just work for concrete nouns, but abstract ones too. If I were to try and describe the complex feelings of anger that build up in me every time I see you, I might use the words "I hate you" to describe that, either by saying them or writing them down on paper. As such, I'm able to describe to you those feelings that I'm feeling without having to make sure you're feeling them as well, although you might if I say that I hate you. Me throwing a punch at you could also be quite a clear sign that I hate you as well. Finally, we can also point to some examples of signs which exist in nature. For example, if we see smoke rising from a forest, it's a pretty good sign that there is some fire happening within that forest somewhere. Likewise, if there's puddles on the floor, that's a pretty clear sign that it has been raining. Now, the granddaddy of modern semiotics is Ferdinand de Saussure, who in 1916 had a volume of work posthumously published called The Course in General Linguistics. In it, he introduces this concept of the sign and suggests that it has two elements to it: the signifier and the signified. So the signifier is the thing that does the standing in for something else. The word dog, either written down or said, for example, the words "I hate you" or that punch, which I'm definitely not going to throw at you. By the way, depending on who is watching this, I probably don't actually hate you. I'm not even really sure why I chose hate as an example there. The signified is the thing or idea that the person trying to communicate is trying to evoke. So, for example, a four-legged animal which wags its tail and barks, which we often call a dog, all that complex, a mixture of emotions that we commonly describe as hate. Now, this may seem very, very pedantic, but Saussure lays it out in writing in order to communicate the idea that there's often no inherent link between the signifier and the signified. Saussure was primarily a linguist, and so he was interested in how the use of the letters D-O-G to mean dog don't actually have any natural link to that animal, other than the fact that as a society we've decided that when we put the letters D, O and G and the sound dog together, that that's what it will mean. Saussure is also very keen on this idea that when I use the word dog, I'm not referring to a specific dog, but to more the concept of dogginess. Even when I'm trying to explain to you what kind of animal my new pet Fido is, I'm actually trying to communicate you the idea of dogginess in order to describe what animal that is, rather than to evoke the idea of my specific dog, Fido. Now, many of Saussure's ideas of semiotics are very bound up in looking at linguistics, and so the American semiotician Charles Sanders Peirce looks to develop these ideas further, particularly to how we can look to use these concepts outside of written or spoken language. So, rather than suggesting that the signifier never has a link to the signified, which, once we begin to look beyond language, becomes slightly more contestable, Peirce suggested that there is actually a number of different ways in which signifiers sometimes link to signifieds. Although later in his career he was to expand upon these greatly and then also retract that expansion, Peirce puts out that there are mainly three different kinds of sign: an icon, an index, and a symbol. An icon is anything with a physical resemblance to the idea or thing that it's trying to evoke. My drawing of a dog, for example, or photograph of a dog, has an inherent link to a dog itself, as it physically resembles that thing. An index is a sign which has a link to the thing that is being evoked by direct relation. So to look back at my earlier examples of smoke coming from fire and puddles coming from rain, both of those are good examples of indexes, because we know that there is a causal link between the presence of puddles or rising smoke and fire and rain. We can also use the term index to describe signs which require a direct link in order to make complete sense. The word me, for example, doesn't mean an awful lot until we know who's saying it. When I say the word me, it means something different to when you say the word me. Finally, we have a symbol. A symbol is something which has no relation between the signifier and signified, other than the fact that we have decided as a society that those two things should be linked. Language is a great example of this. For example, if there was some text in front of me in Mandarin, I wouldn't be able to understand it without having the existing context of what each of those characters means. Another example, which is often used to explain symbols, is that of traffic lights. There's no inherent link between the idea of red and the fact that we should stop, and the colour green and the fact that we should go, other than, as a society over many, many years, we've decided that they should mean that. At first glance, semiotics can feel a little bit like theorising for theorising's sake. It can feel like we're taking something relatively obvious and making it academic just for the sake of sounding clever. Whenever we're examining society and culture, however, we're primarily looking at things which are standing in for something else, and we're also often looking at that idea of how we communicate. And so,
Okay, let's stop it there. He's back and consider the contention that language, words, have no inherent link to meaning, that they're arbitrary, and that we make this up. If we're talking in English, thank you. If we're speaking in English, we might say that the noise that a dog makes is woof woof or bow wow. What about in Bengali or Hindi? What does a dog say? Hum hum? How how? In Romanian it's hum hum that a dog makes. What about a duck? We would say in English quack quack. What about in Bengali or Hindi?
Same.
Sorry?
Same.
Same? Okay. In Romanian, it's mak mak, and so it's a different sort of sound. The point is that our languages look to be arbitrary in the sense that there's no, I mean, it differs across languages for many things. We have a totally different sounding word for dog in Hindi, for example, versus English. Kuta? Something like that. Kuta? Kuta. Okay. And so in that case, that doesn't have any resemblance to the word dog in English, or the sound of that word. But there's also this notion of onomatopoeia. You're familiar with that maybe from poetry. We talk about the buzz of a bee, for example, and that buzz sounds like what a bee sounds like when you're close to it, rapidly flapping wings. It makes that sort of buzz sound. And so there are some words that have an indexical meaning to the word. And it's not necessarily an arbitrary one. And so looking at across languages, we can decipher some of that. Let's get rid of Tom here, the doctoral student who mispronounced purse, and consider this next slide. This is the logo for Microsoft and for Google. And these are the ways that we would specify what those exact colors are. And there's 4 colors here and 5 colors, or 5 colors here and 4 colors here. And the blues are not the same in the two. The reds are not the same in the two. And in fact, it's called orange red in the case of Microsoft. And the yellows are not the same. And greens are not the same either. So even though there's an overlap of 4 of the 5 colors that are represented here, they're not the same. When you see the Microsoft logo, let's look at that first. Without learning what Microsoft is trying to convey, if you're just looking at this, what do you see? What sort of representation, if any, is there with this particular logo? Is this, in other words, totally arbitrary, or is there some logical link to what Microsoft is all about?
Windows.
Windows, okay. So
Windows and colorful windows.
And a colorful window. So it looks like these are window panes, sort of cross going across, and these separate panes are different colors. How about Google? Does that have any inherent meaning to you? G obviously is for Google, and Google sounds like the word for an infinite amount of something. But Google isn't quantifiable. So that was a link that Google was aware of when they chose that name. And if you've read the novel or seen the movie Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri, you've seen how Google became a person's name because it was reading a particular story, and it contained the notion of Google. And rather than getting the grandmother's name when she was going on the train to get when the train crashed, he used that name for the character, who was a son. And actually, this Mira was telling her own story. She transposed her gender in the story from female to male. But I know this because she grew up next to a couple of friends of mine, Nick and Ruby Delacchia in Rhode Island, and Ramir Nair made the film of the movie. She invited them to be a part of it because they all knew Mira. They all knew Jhumpa Lahiri. So at any rate, that's a diversion. Let's look at what these people, who are all from Indonesia with the exception of one in the US, made of it. They're looking at brand meaning and social categories, a semiotic approach to future marketing, or for future marketing. And so for Microsoft, they said the overall design is a window, which you all said, through which we see things, information, knowledge, according to our preferences, for one of these window panes. Windows let in fresh air. Okay, so that's a logical sort of extension of what windows are all about. This is more problematic, perhaps. They say the orange stands for the office suite representing life in businesses. That could also mean a busy life. The green stands for the Xbox, Microsoft gaming platform, which could also be interpreted as fun. The blue stands for Windows operating, which can be interpreted as a color that may give calmness to the user's daily life. And the yellow stands for Microsoft search engine Bing, which signifies optimism and creativity. Now, we said earlier that there's no inherent link between colors, the color red in that case, and what it means. Let's re-examine that. Is there any potential basis for these interpretations based on some logical sort of link? If we look at red, we might begin to think of what things are red. Well, fire is red, stoplights are red, blood is red, and so these are all exciting sorts of things, that is not necessarily in a good way, but they raise the emotions. It's also at one end of the spectrum and sort of a deep blue, purple at the other end of a rainbow sort of spectrum. And so it may be that at that other end it's calming. The blue that was contended in one of these 4 points might be inherently calm. And indeed, if you have a blue background on your website, people stay longer, and it looks like probably they're in a calm mood rather than moving on rapidly. So there may be, although it doesn't appear so initially, there may be some link that can be interpreted. Green standing for fun, yellow standing for optimism and creativity, maybe. What we could do is ask a bunch of people, what sorts of emotions do you link with each of these colors, and show them the colors. And we choose, in this case, the particular color blue that Microsoft is using, particular color yellow they're using, and so forth, and get some evidence for that. Does that make any more sense? Do you think there are some potential links to color and our feelings, our mood, that is generated in being saturated in that color?
Yes.
Okay. So these are Microsoft's interpretations, and no doubt they did some research in choosing not only the colors they would use, but the particular hues and saturations and so forth that go into making up their logo with these particular colors. They certainly wouldn't want to have a logo that created dread and fear and so forth. I used to live in Philadelphia, and the police department had a really bad reputation. They had a mayor called Frank Rizzo, who was the former police chief, and he was known for brutalism. They were attacking one home that had a family in it because there was some link to crime, but they wound up killing the whole family. There was a cartoon in the Philadelphia Inquirer where the little girl comes up to a policeman and says, Mister, will you help me get my cat out of the tree? And he said, sure, little girl, and shot the cat. So it had a very bad reputation. The police cars at the time were red and had red flashing lights, and they changed it to blue with blue flashing lights. And what the effort was to sort of rehabilitate the image of the police department by having a car pull up that was in soothing colors rather than one that had exciting colors and was going to make people more agitated and more emotional. So color symbolism is a whole area of study, and it's something that, in this case, the logos went into with research, choosing among. For Google, it's a little bit more arbitrary. Sign 1 is constructed by 3 universal basic colors, red, yellow, and blue, where the combination of these colors can also create another basic color, green. Simply saying the concept results in various combinations of the basic color. And the connotative meaning, they're saying, is the use of these color palettes is intended to reach as many people as possible because the colors are easily recognizable. The logo's 4 dominant colors stand for innovation, dominance, variation, and sophistication. Now again, we could go through those individually and see if those are consistent with your interpretations of those colors and which one go with which. And obviously the big capital letter G stands for Google. Now if you've done a Google search, do they always use this particular logo?
Yes.
No, they have on special days the logo changes. They use doodle.
Yeah, doodles, different sorts of creative images. Some are consistent with a holiday that is on that particular day and so forth. So they're finding ways to have variations on this particular color theme in order to say that we're in tune with this culture. We're in tune with what's happening, and we're playful. That Google is something that plays with information, plays with knowledge. And we use it as a verb as well. We'll say we'll Google something. And so it's become obviously a part of our daily lives and part of our vocabulary. Now, Roland Barthes is a French semiotician, was a French semiotician, and he's looking at two levels that he's calling language and myth for what a particular image represents. And so he's saying here, I'm at the barber shop and a copy of Paris Match is offered to me. On the cover, a young Negro in a French uniform, this was 30, 40 years ago, is saluting with his eyes uplifted, probably fixed on a fold of the tricolor French flag with the three-colored Indian flag. So he's saying at the level of language, this is the signifier, that cover of the magazine, and what is signified is something about Frenchness and militariness. And the cute sort of boy and so forth is making that an interesting image. But that whole thing, that whole interpretation with the sign and the signifier, becomes a sign for another signification at the level of myth. He's saying at the level of myth, what this cover is really saying is we French were good colonialists. Our former subjects in Africa love us, salute the flag, are loyal to France, and so we did a good job colonizing Africa. And so that may or may not, but it's not an entirely accurate representation of what the colonization of Africa by the French and others was all about. And so it's at the level of myth. And if you think about it, a lot of advertising works this way. If you're advertising a perfume or a cologne, you can't say, if you use this fragrance, the other sex will just throw themselves at you. You're irresistible if you put this on. Because that's not true. And it could be demonstrated that it's not true. But you can't say that in words. You can, however, show it in images. You can show someone with the fragrance and there are all sorts of admiring people. Or you could show it in front of a mansion that is connoting wealth. That's not necessarily promising that if you drive this car, you will become wealthy, or people will interpret you as being very rich, but it's showing that. And so we can show messages and get around the laws for truth in advertising because we're not explicitly saying it, we're just implying it by the juxtaposition of the connotation, the signified, with the object, the brand that we're trying to associate with that sign. And so it looks like this model would work for understanding a little bit of that difference between the explicit words and the implicit images and models and positions and so forth that we're showing. So once again, we heard a little bit of this. The thing itself, or a photographic image of it, of the dog, versus the footprints, versus dog in English and in French, kuta in Hindi, are all representations, but they're iconic, indexical, and symbolic, respectively. And so we need to code and analyze the content of these images rather than just the words that are being used, but both are important. For a birthday celebration in Denmark, and this goes for much of Scandinavia, well, all of Scandinavia, which is Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, not Finland, that's Nordic, but it's not Scandinavian. They put flags on birthday cakes. And if you're coming in at the airport, my reception here was lovely with a bouquet of flowers, but typically you have people that are waving the flag, the national flag. But it's not about nationalism. It's just a custom that for a birthday or for a reception, you celebrate by having these colorful flags, all of which have a cross shaped on them. There was a Christian link to them when Christianity was the official religion. And so you need to interpret that with some cultural knowledge, in other words. If you had a birthday cake in India and had Indian flag all around it, it probably would not have the same meaning. And in fact, it would probably seem strange that it's not the cultural habit here to have that sort of representation or use of flags. And there are certain flags, maybe the Chinese flag, maybe the Russian flag, maybe the American flag, that you automatically have associations with because you've associated that with various political, military, and cultural events. And so a flag can represent a country, but the way that it represents it depends upon your image of that country, its people, its behavior in the past, and so forth. So, in other words, in order to do semiotic analysis, we really need to know something about the culture. It's not a universal language. There may be some universalism in colors, but even there are differences in the way that a particular culture uses the color red, for example, or the color green. And the colors on the flag probably, independently of being together on the flag in a particular order, connote something to you, especially if they're the same tone and hue and color intensity and so forth. So we need to code words, but we also need to pay attention to the visual content. And the cultural context, once again, this is a Toyota Prado that was being advertised in China. And these characters, which you might see in front of a bank or an educational institution, one is the male and has his paw on the globe, and the other is the female and has her paw on a cub, a baby. And they're sort of dog lions in Chinese culture, and they're sacred animals, and so they're connoting that this bank is a part of Chinese culture. And incidentally, in the video that we saw, he referred to the symbols as Mandarin. Mandarin is a spoken language. These were Chinese symbols which can be spoken in different languages. And so Cantonese in Hong Kong, for example, is different from the Mandarin that's spoken in mainland China. Although there's also there's two symbol systems. There's the old-fashioned, which is symbol character, which is used in Hong Kong and Taiwan, and then there's a simplified character that's used in mainland. And so it's usually easier, you understand the simplified character to understand the traditional one, because it's a stylized representation, but not necessarily to go the other way because they don't know what you've left off in the simplified. Okay, I'm going off track here, but he was a little mistaken when he referred to the Mandarin symbols, the Chinese ideographic symbols, some of which incidentally do have some representations. A roof like this for a house, for example, and there's some logical interpretations which carry over into Japanese kanji as well. Although Japan has also two phonetic languages. Okay. So this ad was upsetting to Chinese people because the dogs are raising their paw onto their face and saluting this car. And they say that's sacrilegious, that's terrible, that shouldn't happen. So the next day online, there were two of the dogs that were patting the car back and forth. And so the reaction in this case, the audience response, was a fairly retaliatory sort of response, that they then are making fun of the car, and the lion dogs are having their way with it. So once again, the cultural context is important. Okay, we could also look historically and interpret what things mean or meant at a particular point in time. This is a painting by Jan Steen in 17th century Amsterdam, which was at the time the richest city in the world. They had a corner on transportation, ocean-going vessels, and so forth. And everyone, basically everyone, had become quite wealthy. The rising tide lifts all ships was applicable here. But this painting by Jan Steen has two titles. One is Topsy-Turvy World, and the other one is In Luxury Beware. And you can see right here that he is making fun of the people in this culture. This is the master of the house. He's drunk. This is a prostitute. His wife is passed out over here. The dog is on the table eating the pie. The child is getting some valuables out of the cupboard. The little boy with pearls has dropped the bowl. There's a pig over here sniffing some rose petals. And this is sort of Quaker couple with a Bible. And there's a duck on his shoulder for some reason, and there's a monkey up there holding the pendulum of a clock. And then there's a basket here with a crutch in it that you would walk with. Here's someone playing music. Right away you can see that this is portraying these people as being foolish, that they're spending their money, they're becoming lazy, they're decadent, they're immoral. This is a critique. And there's a little boy smoking a pipe here as well. But to fully understand this, first of all, you need to appreciate that this is a Quaker couple. Quakerism is a conservative religion. And the duck on the shoulder is a play with words, the Quaker and Quacker in this case. And each of these things, well, you need to see some expressions in Dutch. And so one of them is, don't spread roses before pigs. We might say pearls before swines. And that was the pig that was sniffing at the rose petals. Second one is young idlers, old beggars, a moral sort of tale. And that was the beggar's bell. They need to have a bell at this time. And also the crutch in the basket that's up above. And foolishness is time forgotten. This was the monkey stopping the clock. And so, in other words, once again, cultural knowledge is important here. And there were various proverbs or sayings that were represented by these activities in the painting. So, we can interpret historically if we have not just cultural knowledge, but we also need to have knowledge of a historic period and what things might have meant at that time, which is different from what they mean now, perhaps. So here's another, well, first of all, we're doing semiotic analysis. There are different types of semiotic analysis. So we could use Barth's semiotic model that we looked at with the cover of the magazine. Or we could do a psychoanalytic semiotic analysis or a feminist semiotic analysis. And so all of these are different. We could also do different types of content analyses. The simplest form is just to quantify. There's so many of this and so many of that, and therefore this is a dominant image, this is a not so dominant image. But we could also do a qualitative analysis, which is what we might do in these pictures on the right. All three pictures are a picture of a cell in a women's correction facility, a women's prison, in other words. This is the inhabitant or the inmate. This is what the cell looks like when you move in. It's just bare concrete and stainless steel. And this is how this woman has decorated her cell. There was someone that came through and taught them crocheting with needles, and she's used some of it to make some of these items. But the dominant color is green that she has incorporated in her living space. And you need to look for another detail here or interview her in order to see what that green represents. We refer to the American dollar as the greenback or the greenback bill. And she has a US dollar sign on her pillow. All of this is about money. And so her motivation to get out of prison and to behave as a model prisoner and make that happen earlier is she wants to get out and have money and become rich, and that will be her reward in life. And so, again, you could interpret this, but you need some cultural knowledge. You probably need to talk to her in order to understand what these things really represent. And you might look at this and say, yeah, it's green, but so what? That happens to be her favorite color or something. You need to talk to her in order to interpret how it's motivating her, what it means in this particular case.
So what is this feminist analysis, like under semiotics?
Okay, it would be starting from the premise that women are oppressed, that India is a patriarchal culture, and to get married means that you're going from your husband or your father and brothers supervising you to your husband supervising you, and maybe mother-in-law and so forth. And so it's taking that point of view that women are disenfranchised, and that's changing in India. It's not as true everywhere, but that's the traditional sort of interpretation that women are the underdogs, that they have to obey, and their freedoms are curtailed once they get married, and so forth. So it's a different sort of interpretation of any given image based on the knowledge or the assumption that women are oppressed. Or you could have a gay interpretation, LGBTQ interpretation, that it's gays who are being oppressed and trans people who are being oppressed and so forth. Okay. Let's go in the wrong direction. Here's where I wanted to be. This is an analysis by Dennis Rook, and these are Pennsylvania Dutch or Amish hex symbols, and they put them on their barns in order to keep the spirits away. You'll see a little bit more, I'll read this. Nevertheless, what Rook is interpreting is that our modern hex signs look like this, to keep evil away, to keep dangerous things away. He's saying historically people have relied upon a variety of physical and symbolic devices to protect the sanctity of the household. Moats, minefields, walls, gates, doors, bars, booby traps, and trap guns have discouraged the physical penetration of homes and communities. Symbolic artifacts have also performed this function. Fearful markers, skulls, constructed wraiths, and so forth, indicate no trespassing with menacing precision. Garlands of garlic were imagined to keep Transylvanian vampires at bay, and lamb's blood on the door was reported to protect Jewish homes from the angel of death in the original Passover. Hex signs are symbolic entities that are displayed to ward off harmful or evil forces and believed to shield people and places from undesirable natural or supernatural phenomena. The colorful geometric designs of 19th century Pennsylvania Amish farmers affixed to their barns are a relatively familiar example. These signs were designed to protect farm animals from disease, the other misfortunes resulting from witches' spells, and especially the evil eye, and to guard barn structures from lightning and fire. A modern version of the hex sign has recently appeared on residential and business properties in the United States, and not just the U.S., reflecting contemporary concerns about the sanctity of the threshold. Home invasion is extensive today. And so you're under video surveillance, 24-hour surveillance, or just the image of the CCTV camera in this case. The evil eye is belief in India and Turkey and other places as well. What is that about? What is the evil eye? How does that work? How does the eye come in? What is the eye and the evil eye? Is what?
In India.
Yeah.
So in India, like in Hindi we call it buri nazar lagna. So
Okay.
People look at your maybe fame or maybe success, or you are getting you're happy, so people are seeing this and feeling a sort of kind of jealous.
Okay.
So that is not a good thing, and you might be affected by those eyes, those sights.
Okay, affected how?
By the bad energy or the bad vibe which other person has towards you, because they are looking at your fame and being jealous, and maybe they, in their mind or they are thinking that something bad should happen to you, so that we are on the same level.
Okay,
so that bad energy might get into
Negative.
yeah.
Okay.
One point.
So in India, there is no specific connotation attached to the sign of an eye.
Okay.
This is just in linguistics. People use that. Don't look at this person with a bad eye. So it has nothing to do with, I think, what you are trying to express as an eye and as a visual.
Okay.
The closest or the nearest thing which popularly as a visual in India as an eye is on on the third eye of Lord Shiva, which is
Okay.
specific. Otherwise, it's eye. The symbol of eye is not used
Yeah.
as you see in America at various places.
Yeah, I don't mean to say any eye conveys this, but there are certain evil eye representations. What would you do to keep the evil eye at bay so that you're not?
Lemon and green chili. They used to have.
Okay. And
Some voodoo.
Okay.
Doll, black doll.
Old shoes.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Also, in Rajasthan, people hang the face of demon like structure on the top of their like terrace or something, so that the home doesn't get bad energy from people.
okay. In Turkey, you would have an evil eye bead in a circle that's blue with an eye, actually the pupil of the eye in the middle.
So that has
And you
also
have
become
one
popular
over
in
here.
India.
Okay, good.
So the black
So you're well protected. And so you-
At some places we just write, "Oh woman, come tomorrow."
Okay. I like that. But it's protected nevertheless. We would say it's an apotrope symbol. It
I
keeps the,
think in India this color and this symbol was not famous earlier. I think 10 years back if you analyze, but it's getting popular nowadays. This evil eye, this color, because we in India there are a lot of different cultures that people follow to protect from
Yeah.
this evil eye.
Yeah.
Like some
Swastik
people.
sign. There is a swastik sign.
yeah. So this is a new protection that's coming in. It probably comes from Turkey originally, and it's gone to other places as well. And it might protect you if you have a baby and it's attractive that others wish you ill because of your good fortune or envy you. And so the idea is that it's protective, and we protect ourselves in different ways. The hand of Fatima and so forth are other sorts of symbols in that case in Islam. So different religions, different cultures have different sorts of symbols. If you've read The Life of Pi, it's actually by a Canadian author, or seen the movie, Pi starts out going to Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, Jewish, all sorts of religions to protect himself. He's not sure which of these is most efficacious or really works, so he really wants to be safe, and he goes to all of these. And indeed, in the surface level of the story, he's protected from the tiger and the other animals on the boat that he survived on. At any rate, this is an interesting interpretation of modern hex symbols via property protected by such and such security agency. Okay, let's do this exercise. Suppose we're naming a new brand, and we'll see various possibilities. We'll look at a breakfast cereal, a shampoo, and a toothpaste. And these are the only choices that you have. Blick, Nard, Chack, Vade, Quacks, Zop, Trums, Bid, and Solario. And write down, or just remember, I suppose, your choice for each of these. You can use the same word twice if you would like, but in other words, from these nonsense syllables, choose a name for a breakfast cereal, a name for a toothpaste, and a name for a shampoo. So take a minute or two to do that.
We can only use those brand names.
Right. Everyone made your choices? Need another minute? Okay, 1 minute. Okay. All right, let's see what you chose. For a breakfast cereal, how many said Blick? 1, 2, Nard, Chack, 3 or 4, Vade, 1. Quacks, quite a few, 5, 6. Zop, fair number there too. Trums, 3. Did, 3. Solario, 4. This is pretty spread out, but I think a couple of the most popular were quacks and zop. First of all, the others. What is it about those that make those appropriate breakfast cereal names?
Quaker oats.
Quacker, the duck sort of sound? Okay. Is it a children's cereal or an adult cereal?
Children's.
Children's, okay. What about, and Zop is another, I guess, action. We have a cereal in the U.S., Snack, Crackle, and Pop, and the cereal sort of makes these names as it absorbs the milk or water, so maybe it's related to that sort of activity. I don't know. What about some of the other choices you made? Trump did Solario. Any interpretations of why those are chosen as names?
I have chosen Solario similar to cereals.
Cereal Solario, okay. Number of syllables and so forth. Yeah. Any other?
Trumps rhymes with France.
Okay. Also, there's another thing maybe with trums and quacks. They both sound plural, and cereal is a bunch of little things, and so maybe it's appropriate for that reason as well. Any other justifications for what you chose?
So Zop sounds so fun.
Zop is fun?
Zop sounds fun, so it's basically for children, the cereal. So that is why I have chosen Zop for cereal.
Okay, it's fun. And maybe this is one of those cartoon names. That comes up Zop, and maybe that's an action, sort of a fun sound. Good. Let's see what we got for toothpaste. How many said Blick? Nard? Chad? 2 or 3. Vade? Vade had quite a few. Quacks? Zop? Couple? Trums? Did? 1. Solario? 2. But it looks like in this case, Nard and Chak, I think, were the most popular names. What is it about those names?
So in India we have Colgate, so somehow it had some connection with Chak.
Okay, it sort of sounds like something with the same.
Some same C is there.
Okay.
And indeed we have this term chakachak.
Jakarta.
That
Okay.
is what I also thought.
And what was your?
Actually, in India, cleanliness means we say it as in a slang chakachak. So
Okay.
it's chak. So
Okay.
it's making it clean.
Okay, good. We're getting some of that onomatopoeia, apparently. And yeah, it sounds like something that has cultural meaning because there's something similar in a word that's or an expression. And these are all valid ways that we might go about having associations with a particular brand. Or sometimes we may not even know, but it just sounds appropriate. Nard and Chak, especially Chak, have that hard sound, the k at the end. And so if you're thinking in English, if you're thinking in Hindi or Bengali, we have different sorts of verbal associations with the characters. Finally, let's look at the last one, a shampoo. How many said Blick? 1. Nard? 1. Chak? None. Vade? 3. Quacks? 1. Zop? 2. Trums? 1. Did? 1, 2, 3. Solario? Okay, Solario looks like it had it here. Vade got quite a few. What makes those appropriate names for a shampoo?
Vade is symbolic to Ayurveda. And Ayurvedic shampoo is very popular.
Okay, anything else to Vade? Well, I like Chak. It doesn't have that hard sound. Vade is maybe more sensuous, and maybe doing it on your hair is a sensuous, I don't know.
So shampoo, because there are a lot of ingredients that we borrow from Ayurveda.
Okay.
So like Brigraj and other thing, and that is good for the hair. So shampoo, because it's cleaning and it's Ayurvedic would be better, no preservatives and etc. So wait, Ayurvedic.
Okay, Ayurvedic, natural medicine, Baba Ramdev sort of thing. And so maybe those are the associations that you want in the name for a shampoo. And the conditioner might be a little different. The oil for the hair might be a little bit different. All of these might be somewhat different because they're performing different functions. But the point is, these are not arbitrary associations. We can find meaning, we can find rationales for why these sound appropriate, but we can't probably do that a priori. If you're a brand manager trying to choose a new name for a new brand in your line, or a new product in your line, you probably don't want to choose randomly just based on your own preferences. Doing some consumer testing, seeing what this sounds like, what sorts of associations people have with it, how that relates to the logo and the design of the product and how it looks, and what color you make the toothpaste or the shampoo and so forth. All of these have meaning or convey meaning to the brand, and so they are not, or at least should not be, random sorts of choices. Okay, this, I'll get back here. This woman is a travel writer, and it looks like she's trying to fit in with these women who have their hair covered. Is this acceptable? Is she showing to her readers good tourist behavior? Or is she still out of place? Or did she get it wrong? How do you read this? What, say again?
It is out of respect that she is also followed.
Okay, so this is out of respect. It's a good thing. She doesn't look exactly like any of these women, but she's covering her hair.
Symbolic.
Okay, symbolic. And so this is a good tourist? Okay, showing good tourist.
Stereotypes.
Stereotype. She's stereotyping the locals?
Yeah.
Or
So only at certain places women cover their head.
okay.
Not necessarily every place.
Okay.
So places of worship they are supposed to, but not in such places. They may or may not. So even if she is not wearing, she will not be considered as she's a bad. That's a bad behavior.
Okay. And so it may, we want to look at why these women are covering and where they are and who they are within society, if not everyone is covering this way. But nevertheless, she's paying a sign of respect. This is still a positive thing. Even if it's stereotypical, at least she's making an effort. It's like you don't speak the language, but you try to.
So you're trying to associate yourself with the particular culture.
Okay. Yeah, you're deferring to the culture. You're not saying I'm better, I'm different, I'm superior, which would be a bad tourist message to send. Or I have more money, or something like that. Same woman dressed differently with a group of men. Good behavior, bad behavior?
Good behavior.
Okay, why?
Because she is having the respect to Indian culture.
Okay.
And she is some way, wearing sarees may be difficult for modern day Indian woman or modern day Indian girl. And she is like taking that pain to wear saree.
Yeah.
So wearing saree is not a kind of problem, but managing is very difficult. But she is actually doing that because she wanted to be part of Indian culture.
She is very close. The close photograph is there, which may or may not be accepted. Like wearing sari and the kind of cultural position she is having, that may not be accepted.
Yeah, you're right. It's not always easy to tie a sari. We did some
outside
work with
sari, but inside she is dressed.
We did some work with British women marrying Sikh men in England, and they were afraid the sari would fall off if they had to go to a wedding and wear a sari. It was a terrifying thing for them. And there's obviously different ways to tie a sari in different parts of India and over the right shoulder, left shoulder, and so forth. And so those variations, presumably she's wearing a locally appropriate one. If she has her arm around the men, is that okay?
They look very happy. They're happy. It's all the people who are taking the group photo, they don't having the objection. Who we are to criticize them?
Okay, it's just like the photo we just took outside. Happy people.
All the people are happy. The frame within that, all the people are happy.
I think the temple should come out a bit more stronger because it defeats the whole purpose of taking a group photo in the background of the temple.
Yeah, with the temple in the background, it changes the nature of the photo.
And we can also say the new
we can have
Mahabharata
such a
series is
close-up
coming.
anywhere else as well.
Okay.
I feel like that.
This would be fine any place else but not in front of the temple.
No. If one has to take just a very close-up photo of 5 people, the point they have taken there is to show that we have been to this location.
Okay.
And that's why they are putting it there. So the location also has to come out in some manner. Otherwise, a very close-up photo in any corner of the world doesn't make sense.
Okay.
That's what I feel.
Okay,
The whole point of taking in front of the temple should be that the temple or the complex should be seen in some manner so that there's a perspective given.
Yeah, and
Maybe this photo was cropped.
photographers look for a setting that maybe conveys the place, is a symbol of the place. And so lots of people have pictures taken in front of the Taj Mahal, for example. I saw one yesterday where a man was down on his knee proposing an Israeli woman and man. So there, even though they're foreigners, they're finding this symbol of India as particularly expressive of I was in India and sending that message. Here's another one at the beach. Is she behaving properly here? Sorry?
Kumbh Mela.
Okay.
Right now
Which just took place yesterday and the day before primarily. And so, yeah, I was going to ask you, does it matter for your, and she's also got paste on her forehead. If this was in Chennai or Varanasi or Goa or Kumbh Mela or
Banaras Prayagraj.
No,
Prayagraj.
it's Prayagraj.
Prayagraj.
This is the scene of Kumbh Mela, which happens in 4 different places in India. Right now it is happening in Prayagraj, so it may be Prayagraj. Yes.
Okay. And so we need to interpret here, where and when this is taking place. Because Kumbh Mela is only every 12 years, right? And so we would be able to date it based on where it is in this particular case. If we knew that's one of these 4 cities is where this was taking place. But she doesn't have a skimpy bathing suit on or a bikini, which would have been perhaps more out of place in any of these places. In the Middle East, in Egypt, for example, women are covered in black and they have a little tent around them. The children can go out and play in the water, but the women stay covered inside. If people were to, tourists were to go and be topless or be nude, it would be very offensive in that cultural context. And so she's at least covering herself and doesn't have bathing attire on particularly. And so she's not being the worst kind of a bad tourist that we might imagine. It's just flaunting tradition. I have 2 friends in Turkey who study covered women in Turkey, and that's changed in the last 10 years as the government became more Islamic. But they went to an Islamist resort, and there was a curtain down the middle of the beach with men on one side and women on the other, and there was a separate inside men's pool and separate women's pool. But the women went topless at the women's pool, at least some of them did. And that seems to be flaunting the idea of modesty or making fun of it even. And so you need to, and they were not covered themselves, these 2 researchers, and so they stood out in this particular Islamist resort. So trying to be obvious as researchers but still be respectful is the line that we would try to walk if you're doing research in one of these areas. And obviously you need some time to build up that in fact the questions that you're asking are not hostile, that your purpose is not hostile, that you're getting appropriate consent for anything that you're doing. and that you're not taking photographs of other women. And so well, this is true also in Qatar and United Arab Emirates. The women's reception is totally separate from the men's, and they confiscate all the cameras and cell phones at the door, so one woman does not take a picture and show it to the other men in their mouth. So this is a woman who's giving tourist advice and behaving in a way that that she hopes is respectful. And I hope we get back to the video. Okay. So now existential phenomenology, one of the other terms in the concepts that we're looking at besides semiotics. And these are some of the people associated with it: Husserl, Sartre, Heidegger, and Merleau-Ponty. It's basically the study of structures of consciousness as experienced from a first-person point of view. In other words, we're not trying to impose meaning. We're not trying to abstract meaning. We're trying to get the meaning from the person and keep it in their terms, if that makes any sense, in their vocabulary and their interpretation of what they mean. And it's a little bit similar to reader-response theory, which says the film or the ad or the story means whatever people perceive it to mean, not what the author or the director or the filmmaker thinks would. That's the old-fashioned authorial point of view, that the author is the authority. And so this is trying to keep literally to the way that people interpret things. And this is based on an article in 1989 by Thompson, Locander, and Polio, called Putting Experience Back into Consumer Research, the Philosophy and Method of Existential Phenomenology. And so there's two things here: the philosophy of existentialism, and Sartre would be one of the big names there, and the methods of phenomenology, and Merleau-Ponty would be one of the big names there. So it's contextual, it's non-dualistic, it's looking only at the first person and their understanding of what this thing is all about. It can sometimes be seen in interpretive, ethnographic, semiotic, structuralist traditions, but not always. They sometimes abstract and interpret and go beyond what the person is saying literally. Psychoanalysis does that. They're looking for the deeper meanings and interpreting from a Freudian or Jungian or other point of view what is really behind what the person is saying. So it's oftentimes regressing them back to childhood to try to find the basis for their neuroses as adults. Now, these are sometimes phenomenological, but they may not be existential phenomenology. In other words, they may buy the symbol, but not the deeper understanding of the philosophy. And same with yoga practitioners in the West, for example, that they may understand the poses, but they don't understand that yoga came from Hinduism, that it was religious in nature, and that it still, to some practitioner, has a deeper meaning rather than physical health and well-being. And so it's whether or not people buy into existential phenomenology as a philosophy, the method in research is trying to understand literally what people say in their own words, how they understand an experience. So we're interested in people that do recreational skydiving. And we're not interested in saying, I know what this is about. This is about risk-taking. This is about putting your life on the edge and seeing that you can master or survive. That's an external interpretation. Rather, we're looking at what the person says this is all about. I just love the feeling of freedom, or I love the people that I'm with, and I like mastering new skills. These are all possible interpretations that people might have, and we're not trying to second guess them. We're not saying, is that really what you mean, and question them. We can probe, but we're not probing for a deeper meaning or a different meaning than the one that people give us. And again, we're trying to build enough rapport so that the person is going to open up to us. They're not going to give us a socially desirable answer. But we're going to believe whatever they say, and we're going to report it in their words rather than our words. We're trying to keep true to them. They're the boss. So we might look in positivism. This is an alternative way of thinking about the world in terms of the metaphors that they use. And one is a machine metaphor, that people are like machines. And so they look at causal laws, prediction. It's reductionist because they're looking at how a few variables affect one or more other variables. The machine-like metaphor also shows up in stimulus-organism response. This is a mechanistic, it's called behavioralism. Hull and others are associated with it. And it's not used much anymore, but it's a tradition that says we expose a person, an organism, to a particular stimulus, and they give a certain sort of response. So we show color, and it makes people frightened. Red color, and we make people frightened. And that's sort of reducing everything down to just the color, not the context, not the culture, but it's reductionist. Consumer information processing, which we looked at and said that was the dominant paradigm that the modest proposal story that I told you last time was trying to make fun of, is nevertheless one that used to be pervasive in consumer research, especially among experimenters, logical positivists, but in qualitative and interpretive research, we pretty much reject. People are not machines. They don't just process information like computers. Positivism also uses the container metaphor a lot. And so they might say the outside body is just a container for the brain or for our ideas. And so outside is objective, inside is subjective. We can only know by doing experiments and manipulating things what is inside. But that's done in such a way that there's only a limited range of outcomes that we're looking at. And often 2x2 experiments with a single dependent variable, we're reducing everything down to those two variables that are independent and that one variable that is the dependent variable. So the mind is a container for concepts and symbols, and there's only one true description of the world to be discovered. That's what positivism is about. And so its methods and its metaphors are suggesting that it is finding the truth by controlling the outside influences and looking at the relationships between A and B, or X and Y. In existential phenomenology, there are different metaphors, and patterns are one part of that. We're doing pattern recognition, and you do that when you look at people's posts online and in social media. We also do it when we look at behavior. So contextualism, being in the world, being in West Bengal, being in this culture would be an example of looking for patterns in the culture to understand what it means. So I look at the foods that people eat in different parts of India, the clothes that they wear, the sort of expressions that they use, and so the English, because I don't speak Hindi or Bengali. And this is also called the Lebenswelt, the life world. And if you think about it, it's not just people, but artificial intelligence and the large language models on which they're trained are also kind of a life world. The AI is only as good as the information that we fed it, the large language model. And they have tended in the past to ignore blacks, to ignore marginal communities, and it creates certain biases. Furthermore, if it's based on human behavior, human beings are biased, and so it may be that we're inherently getting some of the dominant biases in the culture in whatever large language model data set we're using. There's also the figure and ground metaphor. You can see the two faces facing each other in black, or you can see the white face. And you can switch back and forth between those two. If there's a mother and child in a store, the mother maybe paying attention to the items. They're pushing the child along in a stroller, perambulator, whatever you want to call it, and they're not paying particular attention to the child. They're just looking at the things on the shelf until the child starts crying, or until it gets up from the stroller and wanders off if it's not strapped in. And so she can switch back and forth between what she's attending, the store merchandise, or the baby. And so it's again a figure and ground sort of thing where we need to consider which is ground and which is figure that we're paying attention to. There's also the seeing metaphor in existential phenomenology, reflective and unreflected. They're repressing certain, and this is a psychoanalytic premise as well, they're repressing certain feelings, and so we're regressing them back to childhood. We're trying to make them think as they thought as children in order to get in touch with their true self, their inner child, if you will. We also have sometimes the need to abstract in order to interpret. Furthermore, there's not a single way. We sometimes need to be, as consumers, spontaneous, and there's other times that we need to be intuitive, impulse buying, for example, and joy. Is impulse buying, you have a list of things maybe when you go to get groceries. Well, nowadays you have them delivered in 5 minutes here, I know. But you go grocery shopping and you have a list, and you buy something that is not on your list. Is that irrational? Is that something that shows that you're not a good shopper? Or do you see that in a positive way? In other words, is being impulsive ever positive?
It's being impulsive.
Say again? I'm not sure who said that.
So it's being impulsive. It's not a very positive or rational decision to buy things by being impulsive or spontaneous.
Okay, so you're going to regret it later when you sort of realize that you shouldn't have bought without thinking so much, that spur of the moment is not good. Any other reactions?
So sometimes it becomes instinctively driven.
Emotional? Driven. Okay, and is that good or bad?
Sometimes it comes instinctively. If you haven't in the bucket list, you end up buying.
Okay, you have a bucket list, but you're buying outside of the bucket list? So you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have spent money on the movie because you're trying to save up for a holiday or whatever it might be that's on your bucket list. Can anyone see any positive in being impulsive? Yeah.
Let's say there is some discount for buy two get one or something.
Okay.
So you are not looking for the third one, but it makes sense because you are getting it at a lower price. So that is an impulse purchase, but you are saving on that impulse purchase.
Okay, you couldn't anticipate that, but you're saving money by taking advantage of it. Yeah.
So it has been observed like the people who are having some sort of monetary constraint, or like they want to save money or something like that, they are going with the flow. That means some of the good item or like beautiful thing which is like attracting me very well, and it is also
yeah,
it is also attracting me to buy, but I'm having the money for that or effort to that. I'm going to the positive emotion coming to my mind, or it is, and I'm going with that. Whether I will be using it or not, that is a different thing, but I'm reacting to the positive thing with my positive emotions.
Okay, yeah.
So research says that 80 to 90% consumers go for shopping to elevate their moods.
Okay.
Right. So it's a part of unplanned purchase.
Okay.
Right. Suppose, I have recently published one paper the role of music in this scenario. A consumer has gone for shopping to elevate their moods, and they have been exposed to a very lower meter music and very unpleasant music. What will happen?
Okay, music and moods and trying to respond to the environment. You're not planning to buy a snack, but you pass by a vendor that has jalebies or something else that is just really attractive, and you buy it and consume it. But look back, remember last time we looked at the men in Côte d'Ivoire who were spending money lavishly at the outdoor bar and wouldn't have enough food to feed themselves. The question here would be, is it ever wise to sacrifice necessities for luxuries? And so, for example, food, medical care, education are, in a sense, necessities, or at least we can conceive of them that way, or basic needs. And in terms of Maslow's hierarchy, it says we should satisfy those basic needs before we satisfy the higher ones. But here's someone who's sacrificing the necessities for a luxury good. Is that ever justifiable? No?
So then it is a matter of ethical consumption, responsible consumption, and other things will come. But what about a kind of a kid or a kind of a family member or like the lovable one? They are asking for some product. They are asking, okay, this is good. So if we are not buying in that moment, we are actually making them sad in that sense.
Okay. So mommy, buy me a lolly, buy me a sweet, can sometimes be convincing to the parent, but maybe a good parent would say, well, you have to wait, we'll have that after dinner or something. But this is us saying what they should have. Or it's the rich telling the poor, look, you should spend your money on just these basic foods. It's rice, and not on these sweet things, because we know that that's not good for you. But this is us telling them what to do. And I have this notion called leaping luxuries, where people disobey the Maslow's need hierarchy and buy these luxurious goods, and it may sometimes bring them pleasure, even though they're going to have to eat less for the following week. Yeah.
So it depends on the moods also. If someone is having negative mood, he is very negatively evaluate the product. So impulse buying chances are very less. If someone is in a happy mood, so impulsive buying chances are very high, and the product should be lower impulse product.
Yeah, and there's a difference between.
The advertisement has been framed on the basis of this. That is, as many of my friends have told, that is, they used to give discount 1 plus 1 or other thing.
Okay.
That attracts the impulsive buyers.
Okay, and there's a difference between impulsive buying and compulsive buying. If
I sometimes see, like whenever like gift item, extra thing, it may have the compulsivity. But once we go for the impulsiveness, then there is a huge role of mood to play, as he was talking about. The mood would be there. There would be a kind of like unfulfilled demand or something like that. The kind of quick connection with a need inherent or latent need with the kind of product we associate. The level of association is very quick, and we go with that sort of pad, like that model can be going very fast.
Yeah, if you're not absolutely opposed to alcohol, maybe you see an alcoholic, a cold beer on a hot day, and it looks good, and you consume it, and maybe that's okay, and we can justify the happiness that it brings. But if you become an alcoholic, then you become a compulsive buyer, and you're out of control. So presumably we would draw the line somewhere. Even though it may be us telling them what to do, it's hard to justify becoming an alcoholic or a drug addict because we're losing control of ourselves, our own behavior. Just a couple of slides, and we've got a couple of minutes. So existential phenomenological models, we would begin a circular sort of flow of the research. We would begin with a general lead-off question, as in many other qualitative research. Tell me about what it's like during Durgapur, or whatever it might be. And then the context, we would begin with just descriptive probes. What was that like? How did that feel? How did that affect your family? Things of that sort. But again, here we say, don't ask why, because we're asking the person for a justification. We're just telling them to describe what this thing is like. And they may, in doing that, tell us why, but they may not. We're trying to get them to open up to us, but we're not probing with that sort of penetrating, disturbing question of why. We're trying to get a phenomenological understanding by a short dialogue. Short descriptive questions, and then some follow-ups, some probes that we use as well. So we're interpreting the interview. We're trying for an emic approach. Remember, emic is as the person sees it rather than as we see it, which would be an etic point of view. And this comes from phonemic and phonetic in linguistics. An emic approach, suppose we're trying to understand what good service means in a particular product or service context. And a person basically tells us, I don't want them to make me, the salesperson, to make me feel down if I'm trying to buy a computer. Or I don't like being told what to buy. I just want to be given the information and then I'll make the choice. We also assume that there's autonomy of the text, that we're not forming hypotheses, we're not making inferences, we're not making conjectures. It means whatever the person says that it means, because we're looking at what it means to them. We try to bracket our preconceptions and keep them out of it and listen really to what the person is saying. And we sort of do away with our pre-understandings. We think we know what's going on. We think we know that people talk about safety attributes of an automobile in terms of performance, but if it winds up being security to hide your person, that's fine, because that's what it means to the person. We sometimes use interpretive groups to help bracket in the context of the whole interview, that is groups of people. We may also use hermeneutic circles, which may be one person or multiple people, but we're using a first-person interpretation. We're going from the part to the whole. So we look at a wedding dress and the role that plays in the wedding ceremony, and then we go in a more global sort of way and look at what a wedding is supposed to be. And so we're going from the particular to the general, but we're not generalizing ourselves. We're only reporting what this person or this group of people are saying. And that's all for, almost all, for this slide set. What was this one? Discovery versus justification. In positivism, you discover something, you form a hypothesis, and then you test it, which is the justification. We're putting those together when we do phenomenology. The proof is in the eating the pudding. What it means is what the person says it means. It's not that there's a discovery of something and then a further testing of it. And experience is not only cognition. It's what the person expresses in terms of emotions. We're trying to get at what they feel, what they understand, how they interpret what's going on, rather than how we interpret what's going on. Now this is sort of a niche research tradition. It was big for a while in the 90s in consumer research. It's not as big today, but it's not absent. There are still people that use a phenomenological approach. And they're trying to present, and it's hard to get it published these days, they're trying to present a description as seen through the eyes of the participants that they're engaged with. And the one principle is you don't put words in their mouth. You report their own words, you report their own concepts. You don't go to a higher level of abstraction. You don't go to an interpretation beyond what the person themselves have offered. And so if you're trying to understand what roller skating is like, you get the person's interpretation. If you're trying to understand what roller derby is all about, where women sort of bang each other to fall down on not the ice sheet, the wood sheet that they're roller skating on, they may tell you a story about how this is really the exciting thing in their life, and they don't do this full-time, but they do this on weekends or once in a while too, when a group comes through that is a competing team. And so you're interested in their interpretation of how this creates meaning in their lives. And in fact, there is an ethnography of roller derby women and what that means in the American Midwest. So that would be a particularly phenomenological study without trying for grand theory as a result of the research. So that's all of those words that we had up, phenomenology, existential phenomenology.
Sir, it has been observed like mostly the qualitative research are going with or following a particular structure, like as you have already talked about open coding and all the coding things, like but nowadays we are also can see that there are so many use of or so much of use of AI and plus like deep learning, machine learning, neural network, multi label analysis. So is it still would be considered to be the qualitative research, or it would be converted into quantitative?
No, it's still qualitative. We're still dealing at the level of words. We're not counting things. We're not using that form of content analysis, but rather a qualitative analysis of what do things mean. It's just that in phenomenology we're trying to use the person's categories, the person's words to explain what this thing means to them. We can still do coding, but we would stop short of selective coding and abductive reasoning, because those are more interpretive. Excuse me, I did that right into the microphone, I'm sorry. But yeah, we're doing the same process, it's just that we're stopping at the level where the person's words stop and our interpretive words begin, because we want to use their understanding and in fact their words rather than our own.
And adding the sentiment analysis and all those things. Sentiment analysis, how that can also be considered as qualitative in that.
It's qualitative certainly, but it's not phenomenological, because in that case the AI or whatever is interpreting the sentiment based on the words that people use and putting them in a category of love or hate, strong or weak interpretations of the sentiment. Yeah.
So, in narrative analysis and discourse analysis, what is the unit of analysis and who might be the respondents for that?
What is the unit of analysis?
Individual or a group of people? Where do the data come for narrative analysis and discourse analysis?
Yeah, the discourse is oftentimes coming from ethnography or search of the internet and seeing what people say. The narrative analysis could be the transcript of our interviews.
Individuals.
Yeah, but it's not necessarily. We could look at narratives in stories, or we could look at narratives in myths, or we could look at narratives in historical accounts. The narratives occur in lots of different places, and they're basically, we're looking for stories, and we can do the same with transcripts of interviews. And the discourse is just looking at a broader sort of level, trying to understand what the cultural discourse is and the subcultural discourse among a particular group of people. And so Bengalis are not necessarily like other Indians, and so we would try to understand the Bengali discourse about whatever it is that we're trying to understand, a particular holiday, a particular symbol, the eagle eye beads, and so forth. So it's sort of the level that we're looking at. Is it a particular story, a narrative in the transcript or in the historical record that we're trying to analyze? Or are we trying to analyze a culture in terms of, or a subculture probably in terms of what it says? So we could look at the hip-hop community and look at what their understanding is of a particular practice, hip-hop movement that they're engaging in. Okay, let's take a break. And if each group has one person with a USB key, there's something that I want to give you before the next set.